Welcome. This is the second part of making this Trossingen Lyre replica, and in this part we will cover the shaping of the lid, a bit more chiseling, and then the gluing. With that, let's get started. Now for the lid I ordered a piece of thin maple, which is the same kind of wood as was used on the original Trossingen Lyre. I started sawing out the shape of the lid with this squirrel saw. For the long sides, where I only had to remove a bit of material, I used a knife. And I know it looks a bit like the knife is very dull here, but actually it's sharp enough to shave and the wood is just so hard. Now, unfortunately, I forgot a couple chiseling clips in the last episode, so there's another time-lapse incoming. But by now I figured out how to place the tripod so that the picture doesn't tear and jump around as I hit the chisel. So, enjoy some more chiseling footage. And I actually have hours and hours of footage just like this. I thought maybe I can release a full-length wood chiseling video. I don't know, maybe it's relaxing. So if you want to see that, then let me know in the comments. To keep the video shorter than a couple hours, let's jump to where I start thinning the lid. The thinnest solid piece of maple that I could get was 7mm thick, but it actually needs to be as thin as 2mm in some sections. The original Trossingen Lyre had a soundboard with an uneven thickness. The thickest spot was right under the bridge, and then it thins out from there. And so, since I already have a piece of wood that's too thick that I need to make thinner, I thought I can replicate that. Unfortunately, as you can see, I did not have a good time with the hand planes. They are very cheap ones, but I did sharpen them myself, so sharpness shouldn't be an issue, but still I could not get them to work. I cut the footage here down quite a bit, but I tried for half an hour or so. Both of the planes you see here, they just keep getting stuck. Yeah, so I switched back to the chisel. By now I had quite a bit of confidence with it already and knew that I could control it much better than the hand planes and not chisel through. It is a bit more risky, but yeah, the planes were just not working. So I used the chisel to get down to around 4mm and then used sandpaper for the rest of the way. Now at this point I ran into a little bit of an issue. The grain of the wood here is really deceptive. It's barely visible, but also varies greatly between the different areas of the wood. So here on the arms it runs down, so when I chisel in this direction it catches the chisel and cracks all the way through. Now luckily the crack was relatively small and towards the edge of the board, so when I finish the lyre it's barely visible anymore, even if you know it's there. So from this I figured out that I had to be really careful in what direction I'm chiseling, and I managed to complete the lid without any more issues. Now finally I had to smooth out the surface that was left by the chisel. So I started with a plane and tried to get some of the higher points down, but I quickly switched to sandpaper. And I think I'm gonna save the sanding time lapse. It's not really that interesting to watch, and again it's a couple hours of footage. So instead let's look at something a bit more interesting. The chiseling left the sidewalls very rough, so that might affect the acoustic qualities of the instrument. So I heated up a batch of rabbit skin glue, which is often used in instrument making for durability, good acoustic qualities and reversibility. And into the glue I mixed oak dust from sanding to create a filler material that I could then use to fill up the rough walls and body of the lyre. To get the lid to fit onto the instrument perfectly, I used this technique where I loosely put on a piece of masking tape and then I press on the lid. It's a bit difficult to see on camera, but there where the lid makes contact with the body, the masking tape turns a bit darker. And then I can mark those spots with a pencil and sand them down. This way the body conforms to the shape of the lid and everything fits perfectly. Now I use this technique I learned on YouTube to drill 2 holes through lid and body. I put masking tape on both pieces and super glued the taped spots together. Now everything is perfectly aligned and I can drill the holes through both layers without having to worry about anything splitting. These 2 holes, they were also present on the original Trossingen Lyre with dowels glued inside, most likely as attachment points for shoulder straps or something like that. I included them as alignment pins so that I can then get the lid perfectly aligned when I glue it. And now come the sound holes. This pattern of holes is very much inspired by the original Trossingen Lyre, but it's centered. The original has them offset to the side, so it makes space for the engraved pattern. I'm using a different pattern so they look better when they're centered. Here you can see it sketched on in pencil. And 2 more sound holes up on the arms. And now I applied some linseed oil to the inside of the instrument. Here I only did a thin layer, since it doesn't have to look nice, but it should make it a bit more tolerant to changes in humidity. Too thick of a layer here might dampen the sound. Still, even with this thin layer, you can already see the nice color and pattern of the oak. And now it's time to glue the instrument together. I heated up some rabbit skin glue again and spread it on using a spoon. At this temperature it's very liquid and easy to spread. Now the lid comes on and you can see just how useful those alignment pins are. I can just drop the lid on and be sure that it's in the right spot. The pins I carved of birch wood. Now I did not have enough clamps to apply pressure all around the lid, so I used some offcuts of the oak and used them to spread the force out over a larger area. This worked decently well, but it would still have been better to have a couple more clamps. Now up on the arms I used a tourniquet sort of technique. I put wood blocks in place and loops of strings around, and then used some old brushes to tighten the string and clamp the wood down onto the soundboard. Now, in the end, there still remained a pretty large area right there in the center where I had no clamps, so I had to quickly improvise and put a stick in place with some thin strips of wood as wedges to tighten it down. And with that, I'm afraid we'll have to continue in the next part. This one's running a bit long already. In the third part, we will cover the surface finishing, bit of cool rosing, carving the bridge and tuning pegs, and finally stringing and playing. I'll see you then.